I'm here today with Scott Raecker, and Scott is the director, a very special character center at Drake University, and he's here to talk to us about what he does as we share together the topic of leadership. So Scott, I want to welcome you to our little blog at the University of Dubuque, and I'd like you, if you would, just to tell us a little bit about what you do at Drake, and then I want to ask you some questions about your life, and we're generally speaking about the topic of leadership. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be invited. It goes back many years that we visited right when the center was starting in Dubuque, and so it's great to reconnect, and I really do enjoy the blog, and I'm honored to be here. So as you'd mentioned, I'm the director of the Robert D. and Billie Ray Center at Drake University, and our center is focused with a mission to improve civility and develop ethical leaders throughout the world. Our work's actually gone on for 20 years, since 1997, when Governor Ray had a vision coming out of the Iowa Sesquicentennial as a lasting legacy, to be able to engage and promote for Iowans our best qualities to enhance civility through character development. That work started in '97 with the Character Counts framework, the 6 pillars of character with 1 5th grade classroom, grew to a statewide entity. As our work evolved over the years, we really now work from early childhood to the corporate and community environment. Most recently, I was telling somebody the other day, we've been engaged with the delivery of character-based skills for early childhood, pre-K, for parents and educators, in the same week that we're releasing standards for presidential debate as it relates to civility. So it's really that scope and spectrum around core values and how you bring those into ethical leadership.
Well, I'd say we're in a type of election where it would have been very good for a number of candidates to have experienced the character curriculum.
One of the things that I'm a positive, I'm an optimist, and so somebody asked me about the other day how troubled I am. Well, I am troubled about the current environment, but I actually look at it as a positive in this sense. It has moved the issues of civility, ethical leadership, and character from things that were nice to things that are necessary. We've long believed they've been foundational in leadership, and we've taken that for granted, I think, in many regards with the leadership at state and national level. But the reality is these are not just nice things that we're talking about. This isn't just soft. This is really critical for us. And so the focus on ethical leadership and what does exceptional leadership look like is so important.
So where did that passion come from for you? I mean, you didn't come out of the womb thinking about character and leadership, so there's a story there. So how did that happen with you?
Well, like many people, I've been blessed with some phenomenal opportunities and a very blessed life. So I was born into a phenomenal family, quintessential Midwestern patriarch and matriarch, extended family. I knew 3 of my great-grandparents very well, all 4 of my grandparents. Had aunts and uncles that were like second mothers and fathers, cousins that were like brothers and sisters. So I grew up in a really amazing family of core values, of love, of giving back to others. So that rootedness started, I think, very early. I was blessed to have the opportunity to go to Grinnell College. Grinnell has a really interesting design still that's come out of the social gospel movement in the 20s that I don't think anybody can come through Grinnell, regardless of your political side or what people position as Grinnell as, but you come out of Grinnell with a commitment to give back to others, that you believe and understand that you have been given this great opportunity at an education that very few people in the totality of the world have, and that you have a responsibility to give back. From there into my career pursuits, again, very blessed. And maybe part of leadership is that there were people that saw things in me that I might not have seen in myself. From my very earliest days when I left Iowa to be in banking in Colorado, and then I was in nonprofit work, and that's a whole other story about the drive of wanting to be something that was mission driven. And then I think really kind of capstoning that for me to this point is the opportunity to work so closely with former Governor Ray. You know, when you think of ethical leadership, when you think of civility, when you think of character competencies in action, he is the person that anyone would want to emulate.
Why is that? What is there about him? We've got a generation of millennials that participate in this blog, who watch this blog, who kind of log into it. What is it? Governor Ray would have been governor before many of them were born. Right. So, but yet, his legacy we've talked to several people who are strongly influenced by him. And so that piece of it transcends time and generations. So what is it about Governor Ray and his wife and what is it about him that makes people so passionate?
Well, I know you said we wanted to keep this kind of short, but that's really the story of his life. One thing many people don't know about Governor Ray, because he doesn't wear it on his sleeve, and he's not, he just doesn't wear it on his sleeve, is he has a very, very strong faith rootedness that comes from his mom and dad and his family. There was a period of time where he actually considered going to the seminary, and he never led with that, but he always led through that, meaning that it was a different time when he was governor as well. But Governor Ray's a servant leader at heart, and he's also an ethical leader. So just one example, and you may have heard this before, but I would really encourage any of the millennials watching this to do some research on Governor Ray, Mrs. Ray, because they're phenomenal of what they've accomplished. So now in Iowa, we're all very proud of the refugee relocation that took place with the tie dam, with the boat people, with Iowa Shares. We're all very proud of that right now. At the time that took place, it was very unpopular politically. He had to expend a lot of political capital. The Des Moines Register actually in an editorial said that he was a clown for wanting to do this. But Governor Ray, if you listen to him tell about this time, and Ambassador Quinn would be a great person to interview if you haven't already about this, talks about that it was not a political decision, it was a moral decision. It was a decision about who's going to help these people if not us, and that we have plenty and abounding love here. We need to open our doors, not as a state program, but as individual communities and homes where families brought these folks into their homes. Very unpopular at the time. So part of his leadership was always looking at serving others and doing what was morally or ethically the right thing, as opposed to the politically expedient right thing. And he's got a servant's heart. He's a true example of a servant leader.
You know, one of my favorite passages of Scripture comes from Jeremiah, and it's referenced by James Davidson Hunter in his book, To Change the World. He's quoting Jeremiah, and there's a passage there where Jeremiah says, "Seek the welfare of the people wherever you may be, in whatever capacity, basically whatever capacity you may serve in." And Jeremiah is talking to an exiled people, so he's talking to a people who are in the minority, who have lost power, who have all that they've known has kind of vanished, and they're in a foreign land, literally. And yet he's saying, seek the welfare of the city, wherever you may be. And it sounds like when you talk about Governor Ray's core values, that undergirds kind of who he was and who you are. And what I'm really interested in is this a value, what you're talking about, is this a value that is somehow unique or germane to Iowa and to Iowans? Why didn't California or Rhode Island, establish a program like this in honor of the state's sesquicentennial?
I think he is unique, but I'm biased around that. I do believe there are core values, and in fact, the Smithsonian in 1996, when they were doing part of the sesquicentennial, did a study on the culture of Iowa through the Center for Folklore and Cultural Studies, and they captured it as a community of culture. And one of the things that they looked at is that there is a real humility here. Sometimes in Iowa we don't really appreciate what we may have. It's rooted in a rural agrarian spirit. Still to this day, even with the transplants into Iowa and our transplants out, there's still this spirit of neighbor helping neighbor. If right now during this beautiful fall, if a combine goes down or a farmer or his family is ill, somebody else is going to come and help them out. So there is this giving back, this servant leadership. There's I think a faith foundation still in this state. Maybe not in the same way it was when our parents were growing up, but there's still a firm faith foundation. But I think his uniqueness as a leader, as someone that was identified, and I would use this word, and I'm very cautious with it, he's a statesman. And there's a lot of great political leaders. Governor Ray was always a great public servant, and he was focused on bringing people together. He had a couple of instances in his life as governor where he stood up for people that didn't expect him to stand up for them. And I think it showed all Iowans at the time that this is a man that would fight for you if you needed it. And so I think that giving back, right? It's that giving. I think one of the things that he demonstrates, but maybe other generations, and maybe even our own is not as open to using, that I'm trying to be more intentional myself about, is just the concept of love. It's what you're talking about, right? Doing the welfare of others. And we see that throughout the gospel as well. And so if you want to look at servant leadership, that's Governor Ray. And I think it's focused on other people. It's a humility about themselves. He also had a great capacity as governor. If you study his legacy of surrounding himself with some brilliant people, he was never afraid to not be the smartest person in the room, and that's how he advanced the state in so many ways.
So, well, you'll be very modest about this, but you were one of those people. I mean, you served in our state in elected office for many years, and it's a huge sacrifice. And so when you think back on your life into those years, what are three things you really take away from your time in public life and public service that you would want to share with the next generation or encourage the next generation to think about?
Well, from a leadership standpoint, I think it starts foundationally with core values, understanding what your values are, because it's really a decision-making framework for you. And so understanding your core values and how you want to implement those. So even with the 6 pillars of character, trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. Those are 6 values that we can all look at and say, I'd like to see more of that rather than less of that in our world, in our capital, in our school, in our home. And the question is not about what are others doing with that. It's what can I do today, Scott Raecker, to act in a capacity worthy of trust? Can I treat people with respect today, regardless of how they may treat me? The responsibility that I have to be accountable for the choices and the consequences of those choices. Can I be fair and equitable in my decisions? Can I demonstrate a caring heart and be a good citizen? Those are just, for me, some pretty simple core values, and those didn't come with the 6 pillars. Those came from my mom and dad and my grandparents. It wasn't until I was probably in my 30s that I could articulate what those were. So that discernment of core values, I think, is critically important for anyone. And second of that is for me, was some newer research around that of the significance of both performance character and moral character competencies. If you think of it, moral character is our best self, our relationship side. Performance character is our best work. And it's not a balance, it's a yin and a yang. We need both of those to be successful, to be significant in impacting the lives of others. So it's wonderful if I can treat someone with respect and be kind to them, but if I don't have work ethic and grit and know how to overcome obstacles or know how to collaborate and communicate, I'm not going to be as significant in leading. And on the other side, we all know people that are real hard drivers. They can overcome any obstacle, but they just don't have those personal relationships. So I think that's a second thing, is really understanding there's this combination in our lives of how we treat people and how we work that comes to leadership. Okay. And the third thing that I want to just say, and I mentioned it once before, but I think it's critical, and I think we all need to demonstrate a little bit more love. I think love is probably one of the unsung competencies of leadership, and you look at great leaders, whether it be corporate leaders, family leaders, whatever, they're people that demonstrate love to those that they're surrounded and leading.
So is that something, how does that happen in the political arena that is, I think our state is different, but over the last number of years, it's been pretty contentious. So how, there will some that will argue that we're past that time, that we've entered a period of American history and state history where I don't know, it's a used to be world, and now it's all about winning and losing, and clearly you would disagree with that. But how, what I've noticed, I'm immersed in the world of millennials. Right. And if I've learned anything from them, it's one is they are very, very optimistic, but they're also very realistic. And there's something very refreshing about that. They have not lost their passion to serve, and they have a very, very sensitive BS meter. I mean, they know when I'm faking it. And so what advice would you give to those millennials who are thinking about public service? And you've used the word love. How do you, for example, campaign on a platform of love in an environment that is just seems to reward disrespect and meanness and the antithesis of that. What do you think about that?
It's not easy, but it can be done. And I would agree. I don't think you go out and that you're going to win a campaign by putting love on your brochure, that's what I want to do. But I think it's a demonstration of love. It's trying to draw into core. So we're talking now in the public arena, public policy. Part of it is the sacrifice you talk about. So to be an effective, I'm going to talk about legislature because that's where I ran and served for 14 years. A legislator in the Iowa House is going to serve 30,000 constituents. That's still a small enough base that you can get to every door and knock on doors and ask people what's important to them. And we took that process. I believe Iowans and I believe our country is hungry for candidates, and I would encourage the millennials to seriously consider being a candidate for school board, city council, board of supervisors, the legislature as they're maturing. We need young leadership. But as you look into that service, it's public service. I'm there because I want to give back. And then it's the love in action. So what do I want to do? Any leadership, you need to identify core values, but you also need to identify core common goals, which is why things like door knocking, you can get an appreciation for things. So then you identify what those are, and even Governor Ray, but I found successful as well, identifying things that people can't agree on before identifying the things we disagree on. I'll give you a working example. When I was closing out my time in the legislature, and still yet to this day, a very significant issue in our state and the country is our response to mental health needs of our citizens, and especially those that don't have the means to take care of themselves to do that. That's a global, common issue across party lines. Mental illness does not know partisan boundaries. So if you can get people to agree, as we did in Iowa at the time, we don't need 101 different delivery systems. It shouldn't matter whether you live in Dubuque County or Polk County, what services you get based on your county location. So we need to reform this system. We can start with that more global goal and start to approach that. That's love in action. Now, what happens though is that people get hung up on the how before the why. You know, you've done a lot of work, I'm sure, on what's your why, right? Our why is we don't want any Iowan to wait for mental health services. And at one point in the legislature, we'd underfunded that, and Iowans, there were over 1,000 Iowans on a wait list for over 380 days. And that grew from 20 Iowans and 24 days in a 4-year period. So we had to address this. My point is that from the leadership standpoint, if you want to advocate in the public arena as a public servant, you identify those core issues of what you want to do to advance the cause. So I don't think Governor Ray led at all with verbal leading about we're going to love these folks that are refugees and we're going to relocate them to Iowa. He led on the moral issue that people were in need and we need to embrace them and try and help them get their lives back together. To me, that's a demonstration of love. So when I talk about demonstrating love, it's the actions that you take as opposed to the words that you use.
Scott, we could talk for a long time, and this is Scott Raecker from Drake University. He's doing a wonderful job there. I'd encourage our listeners and those who participate in the blog to go to their website, and maybe why don't we close with that? Why don't we help us understand, for our audience to understand how we can contact you and your center and to learn more about what you do. And we'll end with that.
All right, well, that's very kind of you. So it's the Robert D. and Billie Ray Center at Drake University. If you'd like to call our office, it's 515-271-1910. Or you can look for us on the web. If you want to Google the Ray Center at Drake, you'll find us. It's www.drake.edu/Ray Center. But the millennials will know how to get there. Look up the Robert D. and Billie Ray Center, and we appreciate the time to be able to visit with you about these things.
Scott, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Appreciate it.